Hi everybody, it's Tawney.
Hi, it's Lucy.
We're here with Peep Show Toys, and today we're going to talk about the pleasure gap and whether or not it is a communication issue. If you don't know what the pleasure gap is, it's essentially the idea that one party is not going to come as much as the other. So kind of a great example of that is the very generalized idea that in a cis relationship, the cis woman is not going to come as much or should be accepting the fact that they're not going to, and whether or not that is a communication issue. So the first question we're going to answer is the gap still kind of existent in relationships where the cis woman plays with herself with toys as well as partnered play? Because in previous videos we had mentioned how playing with toys is a great way to figure out how to make yourself come.
It is.
Yeah.
It really is like essential.
Exactly.
It's absolutely, and it's essential for your own self-education, which is a huge factor. This is also an education issue as well as a communication issue.
Yes, and like learning how to make yourself come, the more you know about your body, the better you are able to communicate what you want. So I do believe that the gap, the pleasure gap, is not as alive and well in relationships where there is that exploration.
And I feel like there's a lot of talk right now about communication in relationships, and I think that people are really kind of moving forward with that because everybody's sick of the gap, you know? And people want to communicate. Sometimes you don't necessarily know how to communicate.
Yeah.
And so it's just learning how to do that as well.
No, absolutely. Like the pleasure gap shouldn't be existent. So definitely take on some of your own exploration because it can assist with that and make you more comfortable having that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next question. Okay. So the next question we have is how much of lack of communication has to do with the pleasure gap? So essentially the idea that how in the pleasure gap, how much of it is an issue in communication? So like can it be fixed?
The majority of it.
Yeah.
I mean, of course it can.
Exactly.
It is something that can be fixed.
Yeah, I feel like it takes such a huge role because I feel like there's not a lot of awareness that there is a pleasure gap or that there's an issue that there's a pleasure gap. If you can't say that that's a problem.
Right. Then how can you fix it? That's why I said that education is also, like, of course, this much of it is, like, communication, but then the other half of it is definitely education.
Yeah.
Because you have to know that there is lack in order to fill the lack.
Because I feel like so many people just accept the fact that it's like, nah, women don't need to come, or like you don't need to, come or whatever. And
also, that sex ends after the man comes.
Yes.
Like sex, and that it's okay, like for it to be over, and you get to be like, no, it's not over.
Exactly.
I didn't come yet, and that's how we start to fill in the cracks and to bridge up that gap.
Yeah, because I feel like you should never just accept the fact that mediocre sex is what you're going to get. Like you need to be able to communicate. So yeah, I do agree. I think a huge part of the pleasure gap has to do with communication. A huge part. I mean, if I looked at my partner and I said, this is a problem, it needs to be fixed, I don't know, then they are made fully aware, and if they don't make strides after that,
then you know where you stand.
Exactly.
And you might have to get a new partner who knows how to communicate or explore other options if you are experiencing somebody who's unable to communicate with you once you have put forth your needs.
Exactly. Like your needs should be something that is important to your partner. Otherwise, why are you in a partnership with them? Yeah. How can women in any type of relationship, cis or otherwise, identify when there is a pleasure gap in their relationship, and what words or ways of communicating can they do to employ this? Okay, cool. So, no matter your relationship, whether you are cis or otherwise, what are some ways that you can, one, identify that there's a pleasure gap going on in your relationship, and two, what are some words and ways that you can essentially start bringing it up with your partner and attempt to close that pleasure gap?
Well, the first way is just know, are you coming?
Yeah.
When you have sex, who comes? How many times are you left out of that equation fully? And if that's the case, then you know that there is a pleasure gap and a conversation needs to be held.
if you feel unfulfilled after sex, if you feel like something that you've asked for or something that you need in order to have a really wonderful, well-rounded sexual experience is missing consistently, and you're left feeling like you are not satisfied or that was not catered to, I think that's a great way of seeing that there is a pleasure gap in place.
Yes, of course.
100%. And then as far as words and things, I think it's very important to understand, this is a little bit of a age-old kind of psychology sort of thing here, is that essentially don't ever say you. I think if you're having a conversation, especially about a pleasure gap, it can be very sensitive. It can be very difficult to have that conversation where you're saying you're not being pleasured to the potential you wish you were. But it is important to understand that a lot of times if you word things like I feel, or like I feel like there's more that can happen to make this more pleasurable for me. I feel like you would be very open to hearing my suggestions in bed next time. Saying that is like exciting. You can be like, happy.
Hey, so I've noticed as of recently I've been kind of keeping track, and I have noticed that I am less fulfilled. Like, have you noticed that? What do you think about this? How do you feel about our sex life? Do you see these problems? Do you see that there needs to be a solution?
Never just go after and attack your partner, because there's a very big chance they have no idea that this pleasure gap is in place. It could shock them. It could also disappoint them and make them feel like they aren't pleasuring you enough. And it's important to let them know that you still care for them. You still derive pleasure from your experiences. There's just a little bit of ways to make it a tad bit better for you so there's less of a pleasure gap.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for coming along with Lucy and I while we talk about this, and we hope we get to talk to you more about it in the future.
We hope you found this informative and that you got something from it.
Yeah, there's no need for a pleasure gap. There's no need to feel unfulfilled. You can fix that, and you can have the best sex that you could ever want. So do it for yourself. Yeah. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Bye. See you next time.